Join me as we sit down with Laura Guary, CEO and founder of Legacy Driven Growth, as we discuss her journey from leading in corporate America to entrepreneurship.
Me, Laura Guary, I am now the founder of Legacy Driven Growth. My work is really focused on developing leaders before they become a high risk for the organization. And what I mean by that is, for me, I actually got into leadership very young age, 25 years old. Like so many leaders in our organizations, I was tapped on my shoulder and said, hey, you're a great high performer. You should lead people, And of course, when you're that young, you're like, of course, sign me up. That sounds great. I think what happens is you get thrown into something and you don't have any preparation. There's no training. All you have now is this fancy new title, and going from buddy to boss, it's a huge transition. These are the people that you used to work with that are on your team, and now you're going to lead them. And I just don't think we set up our leaders, our first-time leaders, for success. And so it's so near and dear to my heart. And after being in leadership for over 20 years, I really learned that it's not promotions that fail, it's really the preparation that does.
Laura will be sharing her leadership principles, how she's cultivated those principles through her work, and how faith has played a role in helping her develop a more happy and fulfilling life.
How do I integrate that faith into the workplace? And it's hard. I can go to church on a Sunday, but how do I carry Sunday into Monday? How do I carry that into the work week? Because the next day we get there and you have that one employee that's in the cave or whatever and can't get out. And you're like, that type of stuff. So for me, I really focused on, I always say intellectual curiosity, but my whole thing was 2 ears, 1 mouth. I have to listen more and I have to listen deeply. And I think that was a part of my leadership, transformation, was to really, the first step of curiosity, I feel like it leads to empathy. And I never would consider myself an empathetic leader. I was very hardcore shell, not very emotional person, going back to the lethal Laura. And so I'm what can I do to make my team, the people around me, feel so loved?
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Before we get started, if you could hit the like, subscribe, or follow button on whichever platform you're consuming today's show. Laura, thanks so much for joining the show. I'm so excited for our conversation today. I know we have a rich work history and, we've been staying in touch through our various transitions through the corporate landscape into entrepreneurship, and really thinking about, designing our life to more align with meaning, purpose, and just generally to be more fulfilling. And your story is so inspirational. I'm very glad that you joined the show today. I'm really excited to highlight your journey and the work you're doing with Legacy Driven Growth with the audience. I think they'll get a lot out of today's conversation. And so thank you.
But absolutely.
To kick things off, just wanted to jump right in. And if you wouldn't mind just sharing with the audience, who is Laura Guary, and what can they expect from today's conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, Dan, thank you so much. I am just so honored and feel so blessed to be a part of your podcast. I know I've known you for a long time, and I just have to say I am so proud of everything you do. We always knew you were such a rock star, and just to see you take off is just, seriously, it's so filling, so anyway, thank you. Thank you. So me, Laura Guary, I am now the founder of Legacy Driven Growth. My work is really focused on developing leaders before they become a high risk for the organization. And what I mean by that is, for me, I actually got into leadership very young age, 25 years old. Like so many leaders in our organizations, I was tapped on my shoulder and said, hey, you're a great high performer. You should lead people, And of course, when you're that young, you're like, of course, sign me up. That sounds great. And I think what happens is you get thrown into something and you don't have any preparation. There's no training. All you have now is this fancy new title. And going from buddy to boss, it's a huge transition. You know, these are the people that you used to work with that are on your team, and now you're going to lead them. And I just don't think we set up our leaders, our first time leaders, for success. And so it's so near and dear to my heart. And after being in leadership for over 20 years, I really learned that it's not promotions that fail. It's really the preparation that does. And so my focus is really in that area of emerging leaders and getting them ready. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm also an adjunct professor. So that's been interesting and fun. It's something I always actually wanted to do, but I never thought I was actually going to do it.
Well, I'm excited to dive into both of those areas. I definitely want to spend more time digging into legacy-driven growth and the leadership development you just mentioned. I think it's a fascinating topic, and something that's personally important to me too with my leadership journey, and also the teaching side of things. And I do want to explore more so the interests you've had in that and the experiences that have come out of it and some of the revelations. But before that, you mentioned obviously the experience you've had in the corporate landscape and being a high achiever, someone that was thrust into leadership, and then having that extensive leadership experience in the corporate world. Can you talk a little bit more about the types of companies you worked for during your corporate journey and what that transition or escalation looked like on the career path wise to the point at which you finally, stepped out of that corporate landscape into doing your own thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I think about this and I think about the students I teach now. And I got very blessed because exactly what I got my degree in, which was finance, I was able to step into a finance role right away. So I spent the first almost, I would say, about 8 years in the financial industry working for a Florida-based community bank. I absolutely loved it there. Great culture. I thought I was starting there and retiring there. But unfortunately, being a community bank, we did end up getting acquired. So you have to move on from that. But I learned so much at that corporation just because I was put first of all, funny story. I thought I was being hired as a financial analyst, which I was in the finance department, but I actually was hired into the treasury department. So I didn't even know what that meant. And here I am, Dan, I'm probably 22, 23 years old. And all of a sudden they're like, hey, we're going to train you to trade. So I'm trading fixed income securities at this young age, buying and selling from all these brokers and stuff on Wall Street. And it was an incredible experience, let me tell you. And I loved doing that. And then I got a chance to kind of move around in certain areas of finance. I was responsible for pricing all of the money markets and CD rates. And so I definitely will say I had a lot of great mentors at the bank that were constantly doing everything they could to just kind of surround me with the right knowledge, the right people. And it was a great learning experience. And then I moved into another role for a very small period of time. And I'll probably get to there because I didn't think about it until actually this morning. It was a very short season of my life. And to be honest, I wasn't happy in the role. It didn't feel right. And I kept getting sick and everything. But when I stepped back in that role, I actually had an opportunity to volunteer for at-risk kids. They were court appointed they had a vocational school, the company. And so I got to go into that tutoring. And basically my job was to help them get their GED. And I don't think that my student actually probably even got his GED because of the fact that I started talking so much life with him and learning his stories. And the reason why I'm sharing this early in the conversation is because I go back now and I'm like, wow, the way our lives are designed and planned for us is so unbelievable. You never know why you're in a certain season. And then you look back so many years. I totally forgot about that, honestly, until this morning. And I was like, that probably is what gave me that, spark and really inspired me to get into teaching. So then from there, I got a chance to work in the human capital management industry for, almost 13 years. And that was definitely amazing. Went on for working for the software company. And then I got to be a partner of the company. So I got to see, both sides of the business. And I think that it was great. But to tell you honestly, I was getting to a point. I'm going to back up for a second because I come from this lineage of business owners. So for us and our family, work was our identity. And it was just ingrained in my DNA, work, 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 work. I was known probably as a workaholic. And I think about it today, and so many people would tell me, you're going to get burnt out. You're going to get burnt out. And I was like, no, I'll never get to that point because I was so passionate about what I was doing. I put everything into work all the time. And for me too, even from the early age, my whole thing was I got to chase authority. I got to chase visibility. I got to chase compensation. So all of these things I wanted, I got there. And I was really successful. But then I stepped back and realized like I was successful by worldly standards. Like that wasn't the success I actually needed. And I'm drinking from all these different organizations, all these different fountains, and I'm still being left so dry. And I didn't know what it was. And my family, my sister, my mother, they have this great relationship with the Lord. And they were like, we can see you breaking down. My mom was concerned for me because even though I was exactly where I wanted to be, and I'm talking about like my very last, kind of jobs that I had, at the same time, my mom was so worried. We have heart disease in our family, and we have a lot of, of my aunts and uncles that passed away very young age. And my mom was like, I'm worried about you. Like, I don't want you to get in that situation and you're not experiencing life. And so I didn't know what to do. And I got on, my hands and knees, and I prayed what I thought was a very simple prayer. And I basically said, Lord, I'm available. Use me, use my gifts. And I laugh because I think that should come with a warning label. Because if you're going to pray a prayer like that, which I thought was simple, it's a powerful prayer, and you're going to be used in situations that you never thought imaginable. Like, it's just crazy. So that's kind of been my journey. I mean, it was most of the time in the corporate world until I took a pause and I said, I feel this tug that I need to go do something else. And I want to step away and have this selfless season. Yeah. So that's how I kind of walked into the teaching side of it.
I love that. I certainly resonate with your story. I mean, it sounds very similar to what, sparked my move out of corporate work as well.
Feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or just plain out of sync? I've got something that could help. It's the HeartMath Institute's Coherence Monitor. This incredible tool helps you track and improve your heart rate variability, leading to enhanced emotional balance, increased focus, and improved overall well-being. I use it daily to stay grounded and perform at my best. All it takes is just a few minutes of a guided session to start to feel the difference. Visit the link in the show notes to reclaim your calm with HeartMath.
I would be interested to understand a little bit more. Like, I know for me, like my journey was almost 1.5 years before I felt like I was contemplating it, but not necessarily committed to actually leaving. And there was a lot of peaks and valleys during that time. And so I'm interested to understand, like, what was that transition timing like for you? Like, how long did it take from like the point where you felt like, okay, these fountains aren't filling me like I thought they were, to like actually making the jump? And I guess I want to also add to that question a little bit. I think a lot about people that kind of mentored me and exhibited some of these things, or this career journey, I should say, transition into entrepreneurship. And I'm just wondering for you, who were kind of the examples that helped you, formulate this path? And I love that you also lean into the spirituality side of things and relationship with God, because that's super important as well.
Yeah.
I also know that some people in my life too have been extremely instrumental in demonstrating some of the behaviors. And I'm wondering if there's some folks in your life that had similar influence on you in making this transition. Sorry, that's a very long question.
I know. There's so much. There's so much in there. I mean, I've been so blessed because I've been surrounded by so many people that have just really cared for me, really wanted to walk alongside, like so many cheerleaders in my life. And you're right. It is very hard to step away. Again, luckily, in roles, because I talked about finance, but I didn't talk about, I spent most of my time after finance in relationship management and sales. And that's a whole nother story how I got there, but absolutely love that. The good thing about that is we know, it could be a very lucrative career. So it did put me in a nice position that I said, okay, I can walk away right now and still take this year off to have, like I said, this selfless season. But it was really hard. Like, you have to trust, because at that time, Dan, like, my team was crushing it and they're still crushing it. And I knew too, I had to tell myself too, they're in their Goldilocks season. Like, everything is just right for them. You've gotten them where they need to be with the help of all my other leaders that were on my team. And the reps themselves, that I'm like, they're going to be successful if I'm there or if I'm not. And I started to look at life now as like assignments. And I was like, I felt like my assignment was done. And it was a very hard decision. I couldn't really tell a lot of people. And I didn't do that because I only wanted to rely on one person to guide my steps. And that was God. And I was like, I have to feel it. And I will tell you though, even that was really hard to do, because first of all, walking out of that, I didn't feel like, wait, I'm not qualified to be a professor. I'm like, I actually wanted to get my degree very early on in elementary education. I ended up getting a finance degree. So that was a unique transition there. But I was like, I'm not qualified for this. And it took me, I had to step back and say, listen, God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And I knew right then and there, like, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. And it was hard. It was hard to tell, my best friends around me, my leaders, my teams, that I'm going to do this. But here's what happened. When I said yes to kind of getting out of the corporate world, I have to admit, the God always is knocking at your door, right? And he's like, let me in. And I'm the one, in like hotel rooms where you have like the extra lock across the door and you can open it. You can only like talk to the person through. Like, that's how I was with God. Like, I was opening the door and I was like, okay, what do you want me to do? And I wasn't letting him fully in, but yet the devil came like doing somersaults through my window like Spider-Man. Because what happened was, when I said to myself, I'm going to take this selfless season, I step away and I get offered another position. And right there, that money again was dangling in front of my face. And that was something I used to chase all the time. And I said yes to it. And I was like, I can do both. But you know what? When you start determining, like, almost like you put guardrails on and like, this is how I want the plan to look, it's not going to happen. And what happened was, I was in that role for a little bit. I was doing trying to do double jobs here. And I thought it was all working. But I think at that time, the Lord was like, oh no, Laura, like, I want you only focused in this area. And so things that I thought were good for me, he actually removed those because they were silently killing me. And he's like, I don't want you to get back into overworking. And it was actually, I heard this quote the other day, Priscilla Shirer. She said this quote of like, overwork is unbelief. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm overworking because I'm not trusting in God's promises. I took on that additional job because of the money, because I thought, what do you mean I'm not going to make it? I mean, we all know as an adjunct professor, you're not making a huge career out of it. You don't get paid a lot. And I was like, wait a minute, but I want to have both. I want to be able to splurge and buy all these things, but I do want to give back. And it's like, no, that's not how it's going to work. I need you here. And that's what happened. And so along the way, like I said, I was just always, I can't even name one or two people because I have been blessed by, like, my thing is like, I just love learning from others. It's weird because I always, like, back in the day, I always used to love sitting in the restaurant bars because you were more likely to talk to people and learn their stories around you. And people are fascinating, or flying on planes. I'm the one that you're like, I got my ear, pods in, don't like talk to me. And I'm like, hey, what do you do? It's just so interesting to have all those different conversations. And yeah, I mean, but there's definitely people that I said, like even starting from the bank until, my final job at Ultimate Software UKG, just surrounded by really good folks that were just rooting for me, which was nice.
And, there's a lot there. Again, a lot of parallels to my journey.
Yeah.
You're familiar with, I left too, hopped into another work after I thought I was committed to the pause, and similar experience and revelation. So I could definitely
it's
resonate.
like a GPS, right? But all of a sudden you're like, the GPS is telling you to go one way. And I was like, and I knew it too. It was like, it had me on the right route. I was avoiding traffic and I was like, oh, wait a minute, let me make this turn. And it's like rerouting. And I still went that turn.
Yeah. And you think you have a shortcut or something and you don't.
Yeah, you don't realize things, like I was saying before, you don't realize things until you kind of pause and be still and you look back and you're like, wow, this is a journey I never even thought possible. And I know we talked a little bit, beforehand about happiness. And I was telling people even today, I'm like, I'm making the least amount of money I've ever made. And I'm the happiest I've ever been. So it's because I'm doing the work that we're supposed to do. Like my whole thing now is about making an impact. And I always say, we all know one thing that we all have in common, right? And you hear it all the time. We're all going to have a physical death. And so it's like how you servant this time in your life and go into the next is really important, because that's all you can take with you is the lives that you touch. And it's hard to realize that, it's hard to even think about everything we possibly have right now is rented. Like we're on borrowed time, everything is rented. Regardless if you own your car or not, it's still rented to you. And it's like, it's not your money. So what are you doing with those resources? So anyway.
I love that. And I certainly do want to dive into happiness a bit more. But before we do that, I wanted to circle back on your leadership time at UKG and ask you, because I've known, you talked about the level of support and people that have influenced you from your corporate time, but also I know the level of support you've given and leadership you've offered to those on your team and those that worked for you. What's been some of the greatest leadership principles you feel like you've taken away from your leadership journey in corporate America that has contributed to really informing the work you're doing with LDG and helping develop leaders in particular? Some of your core leadership principles, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's like I go back again to being promoted at such a young age because of the fact that I was a walking billboard for what not to do in leadership. I was really awful at it. I was lethal, Laura, let me tell you. Because what happens is you have that leadership squeeze, right? Like you want results from your people. I was a high performer, so I was executing, I was delivering results. But the problem is performance and leadership are two different skill sets. And so here you want the results, but your people want the relationship. And so it took me a very long time to actually realize that. And again, being surrounded by some really great leaders that I could just walk, alongside and start to emulate and say, okay, I see how their team is loving them. That's how I want to show up every day. And so for me, it was really about servant leadership. And I think getting exposed to that and having a fantastic executive coach and just his leadership philosophies that he would bring in as we were training under his team were so phenomenal. And I was like, okay, I didn't even know at the time, but obviously now in just my journey and my spiritual maturity, I knew now that they were coming from, biblical principles. So it was like, how do I integrate that faith into the workplace? And it's hard. Like I can go to church on a Sunday, but how do I carry Sunday into Monday? How do I carry that into the work week? Because the next day we get there and you have like, that one employee that's like, in the cave or whatever and can't get out. And you're like, that type of stuff. So for me, I really focused on I always say intellectual curiosity, but my whole thing was like, how can I stop, 2 ears, one mouth? I have to listen more and I have to listen deeply. And I think like that was a part of my leadership, like transformation, was to really, the first step of curiosity, I feel like it leads to empathy. And I never would consider myself an empathetic leader. Like I was very hardcore shell, not very emotional person, going back to the lethal Laura. And so I'm like, what can I do to make my team, the people around me feel so loved? And, it hit me one day too. One of the things I always do, and there's so many things, but one is, I always would tell people, I'm going to give you the freedom to fail and the room to rise. And I think that's important because when you allow people that freedom to fail, there's trust there. And even when you do have to have the hard conversations, you can have them. And they use that as fuel and motivation because they know it's coming from a loving, caring heart, And so that was the first thing that I really focused on. I want my team. I mean, that's how we get better, is failing. So I was like, I want them to try new things. I love ideas. Sometimes I have too many ideas and I can't stay focused, but I love that. It's like, let's just try new things. And so that was always a thing that I focused on. But the other thing I focused on, and if you remember, I started these Laura's Likes, which I recently brought to the LinkedIn community, but it was my way of a lot of times it was things that I was feeling or that I heard. And it felt for me, it was almost like a great outlet to kind of write these was like therapy for me. But I didn't realize the response that I would get from everybody around me. And that people would say, I'm reading this with my family, with my kids. Like, I love this. And I was like, okay, this is something so simple. So it was like other ways that I could make this impact. And so my leadership style definitely changed significantly over the years, but it's really that people first. I wanted to be, somebody told me this one time and I was like, oh, this is so good. And they said, you have to speak life over people because somebody else is speaking death over them. And I was like, wow. And that's why even to this day, I still talk to a lot of the people that were on my team and we say, I love you. I tell my team I love them all the time. Some people might think I'm crazy, but it goes back to that might be the only time they're hearing those words. So it's a little bit, some might feel like, wait a minute, you're telling me I love you, but it didn't matter if, you're male, female, whatever on my team. I'm like, I love you. And we just had such a different relationship. And when you could see it. I mean, that's why the teams were always so successful. It's because there was this team cohesiveness. Like everybody was, even though especially in sales, it could be a very solo operation type of position. We still always operated as a team. Everybody was cheering each other on. And I think that just has a lot to do with us, just allowing that space for everybody to feel like they could be who they were at home and they could be that same way we spend most of our time in the workplace, right? So I wanted to create that space. I guess the term is psychological safety is what they say, but I wanted to create that space for everybody.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely felt. I mean, I think a lot of people can put words to certain leadership philosophies, be empathetic, listen.
Yeah.
But as being a member of your organization, I could really say that the manner in which you listened across the team was felt. But not only that, the steps you took beyond listening to go make changes and navigate internal organizations to make the organizations more efficient and also have the people felt heard by your listening was certainly felt. And I think the freedom to fail, room to rise is probably one of the more impactful things that has stuck with me during our time being on the same team. Yeah. You really lived by that. And I could see countless people who've moved into leadership roles or were able to accelerate their career and not feel stifled, or the idea that like small failures were catastrophic failures, right? And so I love that you've brought your faith into that too, and really saying, hey, I'm bringing and leading with love and really caring about the individual beyond just the outcomes of performance. And by doing that, performance has skyrocketed.
Right.
And so that's great. I love that you're bringing your experiences and leadership to help transfer these messages and to other younger future leaders. And excited for the work you're doing with LDG.
Do you wake up with dry mouth, or have you ever been told you snore? Did you know mouth breathing can disrupt your sleep, reduce oxygen absorption, and even contribute to snoring? It's time to optimize your breathing with Myotape from the Oxygen Advantage. This simple, comfortable tape encourages nasal breathing, leading to deeper, more restful sleep, improved energy levels, and better overall health. I've noticed a huge difference since using it myself. Visit the link in the show notes and use the code GOODVIBES to get an exclusive listener discount of 5% on all products from the Oxygen Advantage. Sleep better, breathe better with Myotape.
In terms of, LGG, are there other things that you want to mention or highlight about the work you're doing currently?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, one of the things I say too is I didn't just lead from the front of the room, right? So I had an opportunity to actually be in that leadership position. And so I've learned so much. So from that, what I did was I created this framework. I'm laughing because I actually was presenting at SHRM last week, and it made me laugh too when I said it out loud. It's called the L Way. It's the L Way because it's based on these principles that all start with L. But I was talking with an executive a few weeks ago, and he was so excited about this framework. And I was like, wow, he's more passionate than I am. I couldn't understand what it was. So I stopped and I said, can I ask you, like, what is resonating with you the most right now that you're feeling like this energy? And he's like, I love John Elway. And I'm like, oh, it's like great leader, right? I think sparkling confidence, John Elway. But I was like, okay, it wasn't based off of that, but I kind of just went with it, which was kind of funny. But the Elway was really about, it's really focused on 6 different, I would almost say pillars, which is lead with purpose, learn continuously, love people, listen deeply, lift others, and leave a legacy. And all of those sort of sum up exactly what I feel are just the qualities, the characteristics, the behaviors that you need to be a really great leader. And that last one, leaving a legacy, is kind of where the legacy-driven growth came about, because it goes back to, I didn't want to be known anymore as the productive workaholic that I was known as. I wanted to be known as someone that is really helping, impacting, lifting others up, investing in our next generation, raising the next, leaders. And so that was like a real switch to me, is like, when you think about, I also heard this and I loved it. And somebody said, you need to be an ET, and not like ET, like ET phone home, but ET as eternal thinker. And I was like, wow, if I can just keep thinking of that as a leader, that really helps me leave my legacy. And so that's the model that it's built off of. It's in its infancy stage right now. I would say it's exciting. I'm talking to, a couple of different organizations. As I was building out this business, though, of course, I phoned many friends that have either similar organizations or that have their own business, just to get the good, the bad, and ugly, to tell me, even though I came from that lineage of business owners, I didn't come very different, industries and businesses. And so after talking with a lot of people, the one thing I heard over and over is that you're going to have this business plan and you'll look back in a couple of years and you will not, none of those things that were on there. So in my conversations lately, they've been kind of steering to sales enablement, which is interesting, but it's been a few different companies I've been talking to. And I'm like, you know what? If that's the need for the organization, that's what I'm here for. Like, I obviously have experience in that, area. So I'm like, that's fine. It's okay. I'm not the one to shut it down and say, well, wait a minute. I want to focus on your emerging leaders. I'm like, let me focus here, because at the same time, that framework can really be used for anything. I can now be using that framework for the sales enablement, which goes into the sales team and all of that. So it's kind of been a little bit interesting journey, but I'm not saying no to anything, which is really exciting.
I love that. I think sales, and you know this from your time, and it is like the most likely business function to get into a mindset of the killer productivity. I mean, obviously, rightly so. You know, sales needs to produce results, but I think it's probably in the most need of an underlying framework and basis in leadership that incorporates these things, because I think it will drive better outcomes in the future. Well, we know it will.
Well, and we always say you don't need that leadership title, right, to operate from a position of leadership. So I think we're all leaders. It's leadership is influence. So it's like whatever you're doing to influence, and it can be in many different directions. So I agree. You can use that framework for just everything, really.
In terms of the framework, you know, leading purposefully, learning, loving, listening deeply, leaving a legacy. Where do you feel like, just organizationally or at kind of maybe a manager level standpoint, do you feel like young leaders, like which one of these do people tend to struggle with the most?
I do think listen deeply. I think what happens is, as leaders, we think we need to have all the answers. And so we tend to do a lot more answering than questioning. And I also think I've even seen where I've coached leaders where they're like, I asked a question and I said, okay, let's talk through it. Like, what was the question that you asked? And they said, I asked, have you thought about this? And I'm like, okay, you're still giving them the answer. You're saying, have you thought about X, you know? So it's actually a really hard thing to do, is to have that curiosity and have that pause and to be asking it. And, even though we could, as salespeople, that's one of the biggest qualities you need, is to be able to be listening and asking those type of questions and having, like I said, that intellectual curiosity. But I do find that right away, you want to go in and you want to be known as, I can help solve your problem. But a lot of times, those that are reporting to you, they know the answer, and they know it better than you actually know it. And it's funny because sometimes they'll come to you asking for a solution. And if you start asking the right questions, the solution that they come up with, I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of that. Like, it is so much better. So not only are you getting better, you're showing up better for yourself, but your people are showing up better too when you get into that. And then I think sometimes too, it's lifting others. This is crazy to think about. And if you would have told me back in the day when I was lethal Laura, like, Laura, what I need you to do is work yourself out of a job, I would have been like, oh no, like, super, no one can have my job. But now I think the whole lifting others, that is when you're starting to, now you're a leader and you're investing and you're starting to build up the next generation of leaders. And so that lifting others for an organization, it's huge. Now you have this strong internal bench that also you're really taking that succession plan document and turning it into a behavior. And so why I think the lifting others is going back to work yourself out of a job. Because if I can work myself out of a job, that means I reproduced another leader in that job. You're going to get another job somewhere. Like, even in the organization, the more and more you give, the more and more you're going to get. And so if you do that, and if you can reproduce a leader where you were at, you can go to another job and do the same thing. It's going back to that assignment. And that's hard a lot of times, for people to think about. So I think really listen deeply and like being focused on lifting others. And of course, leaving the legacy. But those are the two that I think most struggle with. I think for HR folks, I think those are the two that can move the needle the quickest in an organization, so that they're not getting the escalations, they're not getting the regretted promotions. Because when you're telling those folks that you're promoting them because they're high, performers, trying to unwind that and reverse, that's really hard, right? You're saying, I believe in you. And now you're saying, like, but you didn't give them what they needed. You didn't prepare them for getting into that role. So
yeah,
that's my...
There's so many parallels to even the happiness piece and what you had mentioned earlier, how easy it would be for someone who's just on a achievement track is probably used to, being self-sufficient and being able to earn well for themselves, given their own performance, to then associate that performance to others or rely on others for the following achievement. If you're not materially invested in the right way and you're thinking about those outcomes of solely, money, title, the wheels are going to fall off, I think, pretty quickly for probably not only you, but also the team as well. And so that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance because, you still have to produce, especially if you're in sales, right? You still got to hit a quota. Like there's things that you have, but I just think when you focus on the human side of it, it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah.
We worked for a fantastic CEO that said, I'm going to focus on the employees, and the employees will focus on the customers, that will focus on the stakeholders, the shareholders. And it was brilliant. It's really true.
The synergy of that, it was so good. And I don't want to say I took it for granted because I think we knew that it was awesome. Yeah. But now, being a couple of years removed from that is certainly, being out and kind of surveying other companies, and it's definitely was a rare corporate culture to find, and I think we're pretty lucky to be a part of that. Yeah.
But what's so amazing is that all of us that got to experience that culture can now bring that culture somewhere else and create that culture within the culture. So we're actually spreading it, which is a great way to think about. It's thank you for putting me in and being in that environment.
Yeah. I do want to circle back on the happiness side of things now that we're kind of tangentially discussing that a little bit more. And I know, circle back on your comment, something to the effect of, chasing money, right? And then, making the transition, and now you're making less than you ever have before, but you're the happiest you ever been. And, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are listening to this that could resonate with the thought of, I went to chase X, title, money, whatever, thinking that it would give me happiness. And they're probably maybe feeling that level of dissatisfaction, or not the level of enjoyment or happiness they thought they would get from that thing. But maybe you just kind of feel stuck. Maybe, they don't quite know what the next move is to get on, Laura's path, so to speak. Yeah. And so I was wondering if you would have any advice for that person, and thinking through now also like how you're defining happiness for yourself.
Yeah. I think happiness, like I said, it's going back to, it's like when you do something so simple for somebody, you walk away. It could be something so easy about being in line in the grocery store and you pay for the groceries for the person in front of you, or some these random acts of kindness that we talk about. That person's walking away so elated and happy and so appreciative of what you just did. But I'm telling you, you and yourself, you're walking away even happier. And I think and for me, it was in this season that I am in, having this space right now. And I'm not even going to say focus on me, because I'm still not doing a lot of focusing on me personally. But I'm focusing. I've been put in situations, again, that I didn't think that I would be leading. I'm leading a group in my community. And I'm like, wait, I don't feel, again, qualified for this. But just a few words or things that I say to them or that they say to me, it's like, we're here for each other. And just knowing right now that what I'm doing is the work I'm supposed to be doing. It's like, if we're breathing, we still have work to do. And that's all I just keep thinking about. And I'm like, again, when I think about money not being my money, it changes everything. And I think about, and there's things that, of course I still like my nice things, but there's things that now I'm like, that would have, I would have loved to have that new Louis Vuitton purse,
Right.
And I'm like, now that means nothing for me. I'm like, how can I take that money and invest it into, and I'm not talking investing into, my Fidelity account. I'm talking about how do I take that money and, share it with those that need it. And so it just brings so much happiness. And honestly, not to get so religious, but just getting into the word, I was always looking for answers from everybody else. Anytime I needed to make a decision, I'm an open book. So a lot of people know my life story. I share it. I would go everybody else to get, and it's just like where I was going to all these other fountains, and everything. And I'm like, but it was right there in the Bible for me to start. Like all of my answers are right there. And I think just being able to dive deep into the word, it's been fascinating. And you can read a book of the Bible so many different times. And every time you go back in there, something else stands out that you didn't see before. Just the detail amazes me. Just saying, okay, I'm going to do life by the book.
Yeah.
It's a huge commitment though. It's hard. You have to say, and we're all we all get to the point where we're all, I'm still a sinner and things that I do that I'm like, oh gosh. But I'm like, I realized in order to be blessed, I had to be obedient. And as I start doing those things and you feel the tugs. There's probably been times, Dan, that you felt like you watched a situation and you didn't maybe do anything to help it. And you walk away and you have this weird feeling in your stomach. Like now I react on those. Like, I'm like, okay, there's a reason why I'm feeling like this. And I don't know, just kind of my mindset has been such a shift. And it's been amazing. And the people that have been brought into my life and just that I've been surrounded by the right community it's really been a blessing.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you're acting out and living your faith. And I hear, even in talk about the random acts of kindness, I hear less of self, more of others. And that's really what's driving a lot of the happiness. But it's also rooted in the same leadership principles you talked about, deeply loving for your team, listening to others, more of your team and their success and less of yours. And I think that's so beautiful.
Working hard but not seeing the muscle growth you want, taking collagen or protein might not be enough. You could be missing essential building blocks. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Body Health's Perfect Amino Tablets. These tablets provide all 8 essential amino acids in the perfect ratio for optimal muscle protein synthesis, recovery, and overall health. They're a game changer for anyone looking to build lean muscle mass, boost energy, and support healthy aging. Fuel your body with the best. Visit the Body Health link in the show notes and use code NEW20 for a 20% discount on your first order. Unlock your potential with Body Health.
I think what happens too, I think we get wrapped up, or at least I did in my, corporate experiences. I was always getting wrapped up in who Laura was, and I was forgetting whose I was. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really important, for me. And it's been really cool. It's been great. And that leads me, led me into the teaching, which has just been, that is just the most life-giving position ever. I never thought that I thought I was going in here I am going to teach students, but the things that they teach me and the stories and the mark that they have left on me has just been truly, truly amazing. And sometimes, it's funny just to talk about praying. It's for so many years I was praying wait, why don't I have a family? Why don't I have kids? Why don't I have that? Well, I have a family, but why don't I have, my own children? And I have a niece and nephew that I love and spoil like crazy. But why don't I have my own? And I was always praying for it. And you don't know how your prayers are going to be answered, because those promises, when I go back to overworking, you don't see those promises, you miss those. But those promises, it showed up and it was okay, I'm not going to give you your own kids. I'm going to give you 200 kids, students that you're going to get to pour into. And it's amazing. So beautiful.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, earlier you mentioned, you didn't realize it till today, but your first experience in teaching was with the folks working towards their GED. I'm just wondering, like, what else kind of sparked the interest? Because that's a big change, right? To go from leading a corporate sales team at a multi-billion-dollar company to like being an adjunct professor. And so I'm just interested, what else kind of went into that journey of how you arrived at teaching? Because I'm sure there's, like, to the earlier point, I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this who might feel like they're looking for a little bit more sense of purpose, or maybe finding ways to give more of themselves. And so I'm wondering if there's more things we could pull out to help guide them or share from your story.
All have passions, and I saw something the other day and somebody was like, oh, you can't say follow your passion because it's not going to make you your money or something like that. Or they also said, I always wanted to be, an NBA player, but obviously I don't have the, I'm not tall and I'm not this. And I'm like, but you can still do stuff for the NBA. Like you can always follow your passion somehow, some way, even if it's not your job, so you can still. So I think going back to what I was saying, I originally wanted to go to school. Actually, my first, like, I guess besides like babysitting, but like my first job at 16 years old, and I did it for 5 years, was I worked at a preschool. But I was doing aftercare, which was like all fun and games. So I always knew that I loved being surrounded by, children and students and teaching. And then that's when I wanted to go into elementary ed. And I kind of took a step and was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make the money I want to make, because that was really important to me. That equated to success. Always money equated to success in my head. So to go back and say, it's funny because somebody had asked, I think one time, if money was no object, what would you be doing? And I actually said I would be a professor. But I'm like, why can't you? You could still, because an adjunct professor, you can still have a full-time job. You can still be doing that, which is what I did. But like I said, my plan looked a little bit different. And now I'm going back to trying to do my business and be in a situation that I can have that flexibility, because now teaching is a non-negotiable for me. Like that is, the first thing that I want to do. But I think if anybody's struggling, like whatever your passion is, it may not be your direct thing of being an NBA player, but it is, hey, I'm doing, analytics for them, or, like they still need lawyers or managers. There's something that you can always find something. And I just didn't create that space before. I was an over everything, over, worker, over analyzer, over doer. And I had to like kind of step away from that. But that would be just like what I would kind of focus on. And I think going back to also just feeding into somebody else, like you'll never achieve the highest potential for yourself until you help someone else fulfill and achieve their potential. And I think that's really important. So whatever that, looks like, and maybe you don't want to, like, going back to the basketball, maybe you're coaching basketball for, a high school. Like there's options. You can follow your passion. And I think the hardest thing is people have fear, and it's okay. And it's okay, but you have to have trust. I mean, that was the most important thing. Yeah. And I'm still scared some days, I still go back and say, did I make the right decision? But I just have trust. And when you have trust, there's a peace. There's a peace about it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. In terms of overcoming some of the fears associated with that, or even in your professional career in corporate America, I think at various levels, when you move into certain positions, I think you always got to fight the inner critic, or maybe those self-limiting beliefs. And I'm wondering, for someone out there who's maybe struggling with that, any advice you could offer them on helping them kind of maybe establish more trust in themselves, trust in God, or overcome some of the self-limiting beliefs?
Yeah, I think we have to go back that we were all here and beautifully created, right? Like, and we're created in the image of God. And it's such a beautiful thing to think about, that you hear it all the time. There's an audience of one, and it really is true. Like, as long as you are put, you have to remember there's a reason that you're in that position right now. And you're going to, I mean, there was many times that I felt like I got beat up, or, I was looking at others. They always say like, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah,
like I was looking at others and saying, why are they skipping, going from manager to director to vice president, or from manager to vice president? I have to take all these extra steps in my ladder, But you're like, you start to climb that ladder, and then you get up top and you realize, and you look down below and you're like, God, Jesus, he's waiting down there saying, what are you doing up there? Like, I'm here, And so I just think from a confidence level, just always know you're never alone. Like, the person that put you in that position is rooting you on. He loves you, and you're here for a reason. And just when you all of a sudden start to think about that, it just changes everything. I mean, they really do say a relationship with Jesus changes everything. And it really does. And having that is the one main relationship. And bring all your fears, all the things like your anxiety, your confidence, all of that to him, and you'll get your answers. And it goes back to listening deeply. You also obviously you're asking most of the questions here, so it seems like I'm not listening deeply to you. But I feel like it's going back, and when you're praying, it's a relationship, and it is communication. And there's times that you just need to be silent. That's hard to do too, Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think whatever's put, those passions, we all have spiritual gifts. We all have passions. We all have our personality. We all have style. That's given to us. And maybe somebody else's doesn't look like that, and you're not feeling as confident because you don't look like the person next to you. You're not supposed to look like the person next to you. We all have a little piece. We're all like a reflection of, the Lord. And that's amazing, because that person next to you needs what you have, that piece of reflection, to make that whole, to have that experience with God. That's why we are his people, that's how I look at it. But I mean, I get it too. There's definitely times that I'm like, I don't feel like worthy, or, and I'm like, we all go through it. I mean, I've gone through major anxiety really bad, during my time in the corporate world, that I used to think people were crazy that had anxiety. But until you experience that, and I had full-blown panic attacks, it's like, it's a different story. But I think it's okay. It's okay. Like, things are going to happen because we're human. But I know that was a long answer to that, but I just get so passionate about it, because it's truly amazing the way that we're each designed.
I love that. People need to hear that. I think that's probably the biggest barrier or challenge, is people not having developed maybe some confidence in that regard, or having heard a message like that, who you are needs to be brought to the table.
As long as you have that peace.
Yeah. And then also with the stillness piece, stillness and listening, creating time and space for that is hard. And I didn't do it for years, because it's constantly in the phone, constantly on email, constantly.
And everybody has their different ways, right? Like, meditation or whatever, whatever your different way is, that those moments really give you time to reflect, and things like, I know people do different fasting, stuff like that. But I'm like a huge fan of just sitting in silence.
Yeah, that's been a big game changer for me, is the meditation piece, prayer, right? Forced sitting in stillness at certain points last year, but it is a total game changer in how you kind of develop and can cultivate some of the answers from within, right? Instead of constantly drowning out the noise with distractions, with things.
We're not meant to do it alone, And that's what we have to think. And I think that's what happens. We all we try to take it. And I mean, I was always like that, I looked at like delegation or anything else as a weakness. I didn't look at it as a strength, but now I just delegate it up.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you've integrated faith and you're living by that. I think sometimes in a corporate context, for those of faith, it can be hard to sometimes it feels like that message needs to be drowned out a little bit. And I think the fact that you're bringing it to your life, you're bringing it to your teaching, you're bringing it to your work, and you're talking about it. I love that. And you're setting an example for so many others that can follow. That's incredible. And I did want to ask before we wrap up, was there anything, we've talked about a bunch today. We talked about your career background. We talked about your current interest in teaching, your consulting work, faith, a whole bunch of things. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you really wanted to highlight or share with the audience?
I don't know. I think we kind of covered everything.
Yeah.
We kind of went around. In typical Laura fashion, my brain, probably. I'm glad you could keep up, Dan.
Try my best. No, you don't. You're great, Laura. I so much appreciate.
I'm such a passionate person. I get so excited about things sometimes. So my brain, it just keeps going. That was one thing I was always told, be very careful because you process information very quickly that you lose, people and you kind of leave others behind. But yeah, I think we covered everything.
Yeah, I agree. And the nuggets you shared today, some of the quotes, I wasn't able to keep up with all of them to your point, but there was some real bombshell quotes here that really resonated with me. Thief could be the comparison of joy is one of them, but there were so many others. And again, thank you so much for your time and sharing your leadership experiences, the Elway framework, the work you do in helping kind of build and cultivate, committed leaders. Certainly very needed. I think if you look at studies across corporate America and employee satisfaction with their leadership, not super high, and it has such an impact on employee engagement and company results. And so I'm really excited to see all the growth you're going to have on LGG and the work you're doing there. And certainly I know your students, as your former team did at Ultimate and UKG, are just getting a wealth of knowledge and love from your teaching. And so, again, I just greatly appreciate you coming on and sharing your story today. And thanks for the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is great. Thanks so much, Dan.